Hello. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm Stephen Noonoo, the K-12 editor here at EdSurge. And EdSurge is a news and information resource helping you bring the best in education technology through our news stories, research programs, and community activities, which include live conferences and events such as this webinar. So at the end of last year, EdSurge joined ISTE, the International Society for Technology and Education. And ISTE is a nonprofit organization that serves educators interested in the use of technology in education. And for today's webinar, we've lined up a really great group of thought leaders, speakers for a conversation on the impact of coronavirus on K-12 education. This is a weekly series, and this week we'll be focusing specifically on equity during today's discussion. A quick note before we begin, this webinar will be recorded and the recording will be made available to you via email after the live event. If you signed up for the webinar, you'll also receive updates about recurring webinars on this topic. Again, we plan to host them weekly, and each week we'll have a different topic with different speakers. So you can ask questions through this webinar anytime using the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we'll bring you your questions to the discussion as we're able. We're also encouraging you to use the chat, so please feel free to say hello and share resources, but please do put those questions for the panel into the Q&A so we can be sure to see them. And I believe there's a new upvote feature, so you can play around with that if you see a question that you like. Before we get started, I just wanted to draw your attention to a new guide from ISTE and EdSurge. It's called Navigating Uncertain Times, How Schools Can Cope with Coronavirus. And it's collecting all of our stories, our contributors, and some really helpful resources. So I'd encourage everyone to take a look at it. It's online at readiness.edsurge.com. So with that, I'd like to introduce the panelists on today's call. They're all a really great group, and I'm just so honored that they could share their time and expertise with us on such short notice. So today we're joined by Patricia J. Brown. She's a technology specialist for Ladue School District in St. Louis. Matt Hiefield, a future-ready teacher on special assignment at the Beaverton School District in Oregon. And Nicol R. Howard, an assistant professor at the Department of Teaching and Learning at the University of Redlands. So I have a few quick questions, and then we're going to move on to taking some of your submitted questions. We might not have to be able to answer everything, but I will be bringing on some new speakers next week to address different topics. So first, I wanted to just ask, can we briefly define equity in terms of these school shutdowns and what we mean when we use that term? Patricia, can I ask you to start?
Sure. Hi, everyone. When I think about digital equity, I'm thinking about ensuring that everyone has access and opportunity, equal access and opportunity, and that they have knowledge about what technology resources are available to them and the possibilities that they can achieve through technology, whether it be creating versus consuming. And so just providing access doesn't just necessarily mean devices and just handing students devices or handing teachers devices, but it's more about what they can create, what they can produce with that technology.
Yeah, that's great. Nicol, just wanted to see if you had any thoughts about what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just adding more to what Patricia said, and she highlighted the very key aspects related to digital equity. Something else that I often think about when she mentioned opportunity, it is that right now we have a very great opportunity presented to us, and how we rise to the occasion is also an element of enacting equity, right? And trying to close the gaps. And we've come a long way, but we have so far to go. And I know Matt can speak to this related to like the homework gap, for example. And I think intuitively people go to, how do we get homework out there for kids right now while they're not in school, not realizing that we're actually creating this larger gap and additional inequities for students, especially when you're trying to push in greater use of digital tools that some students just simply don't have access to. So when I think of equity, I think about considering the needs of the home, the needs of the student, and also the needs of our teachers, remembering that some of our teachers, they're prepared in many ways to teach our children, but some of them have not had the access to technology and great ed tech leaders who have supported them in a digital journey. And so they may also need support right now as well.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point, Nicole. So in terms of the word opportunity, so not all students have the same opportunity, but on the flip side, that gives schools an opportunity to be doing things differently.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think of Corona Norco Unified School District, for example, here in California, and when things hit, one of the first thoughts they had it was, how do we create a resource list or a guide for parents? How do we think about parents and families at home, and how do we push past the barriers that they've typically seen? And so we have seen some districts actually say, come check out a Chromebook, or come check out a device, or check out a hotspot, because we know that there's limited access. This is our opportunity to support a family and to support a student and moving forward in their digital learning path. At the same time, we recognize that parents might not know exactly which tools to have their students use, but we have to remember that our students have been in class every day with their teachers. So sometimes their teachers have actually exposed them to things that, as parents, we have to remember. Our kids know to go to iReady. They know to go to code.org. They just need the tool in their hand and the hotspot. And I think our districts can help in that regard.
Yeah, that's great. So Matt, I want to talk a little bit about your district, Beaverton. Before this coronavirus crisis, did your district have a clear plan to address unconnected students? And I mean, why is that important in a time like this?
Yes. First off, hello everybody. Thanks for joining, and thanks to Patricia and Nicole as well. Their comments were spot on. Our district, definitely, we started a couple of years ago with a digital equity group to focus on this issue when we started seeing issues of the digital divide. And what we've been seeing, I mean, we applied for the Sprint 1000 grant and started purchasing extra hotspots for our students. So we've been working on this, and we do have a homeless student population in our district, and so I don't think everyone is connected, but we're a lot better off than we were. But access is maybe the first part of the digital divide. What Nicole and Patricia were hinting at also is an opportunity gap, and that relates somewhat to the preparation of our teachers. Some teachers are better prepared to offer things digitally than others, and as well, there are good ways and healthy ways to teach with technology, and then there's some maybe not so great ways to teach with technology. So nurturing those healthy ways to teach that can allow kids to connect and create and collaborate. And to discourage, here's your PDF, read 50 pages, answer these questions. So in answer to your question, Stephen, yes, we do have a working group. We're working hard on connectivity at really all levels, K through 12. It's a work in process, and I'm glad that we started a couple years ago, because it has helped out. And will help out in this current crisis.
Yeah, that's great. So I wanted to follow up on a quick point that you just made. What is important to communicate to teachers? Patricia, can I ask you at a time like this, what's the most important thing to be telling teachers?
Well, I mean, first of all, we are all impacted by this, like all over the world. Even as teachers, we a person like me who has children at home right now, I have to also support my own birth children as well as teachers. So we have to keep that in mind. One thing that I saw that went across Facebook was a reminder to teachers about assigning a lot of work right now and just making sure that kids are okay and connecting with them, whether it be virtually through video or sending a picture. I was so happy today. My son, who's in kindergarten, his teacher sent an email to parents, but she also sent a picture of the classroom pet. And I showed my son, and he immediately jumped up and was excited to see his class pet, Otis. And so it was really exciting for him. So that was just one way to kind of bring some, connection to our kids. I also remember that everybody doesn't have the option to be at home right now. As parents, sometimes parents are still working. And so when we are sending homework to students, whether it be through Google Classroom or whatever tool that you're using, that you're making sure that you're not sending things that will also cause some stress for families. A lot of kids are, older children are babysitting their younger siblings, and they may be in high school or they may be in college. And so we just have to keep those things in mind. I think this is something that we definitely don't know, don't have a lot of answers to. So we kind of have to go along as we learn as we go, kind of thing. And so just making sure that we're being realistic with how we are sending home information to our families. But I feel like right now, what we need to just do is just connect and try to make sure that our families and our kids are okay.
Yeah, that's great. So Nicole, is it enough to only be talking about, let's connect kids online, or is there more that we need to be considering for vulnerable populations?
Oh, that's a great question. I think connecting online, if you can, of course, is nice. I mean, I just dropped that in the chat, as Patricia was talking, using tools like Flipgrid and having the students somehow stay connected with classmates. But my research is rooted in parental involvement and finding ways in which we engage parents and families in the learning experience. And I think, just as Patricia also mentioned, right now is a great opportunity for us to build community and encourage those moments at home. And so I know that it's easier to say it, as a parent myself, who just, it's something that I enjoy doing. I enjoy the family time. But what about those resources that encourage parents to connect offline with their children? We need to think about building those resource lists out as well, giving examples of ways in which they can, learn alongside one another. I mean, maybe it is about learning that new technology, but it also could be about reading a book together. How often do we actually read the read alouds that the teacher reads to our children with our children? Let's read with them and to them as parents as well. So I'd like to see teachers really supporting. I see in the Q&A and in the chat even that teachers, they want to be there for parents. And I think that that's what we want is to build community, but let's also encourage those parents to connect in different ways with their own children too.
Yeah, that's great. Matt, I know you said that your district is figuring things out, and you're taking a few weeks to kind of put things in place. What's the benefit of a strategy like that instead of just jumping headfirst into digital learning on day one?
Well, I think we can already see what's going on in some districts around the country. If there's no strategy system-wide, what might happen is if you're at home and parent, you're getting communications through Google Classroom, through email, through Canvas, maybe go to Flipgrid. If you're getting an inconsistent message, it can be overwhelming. If at the secondary level, if you have all these teachers telling you to connect in different ways, and and in different time frames, if you have different teachers giving different messages, like, oh, I'm gonna be teaching this at this time, tune in. And if you have other teachers saying, well, email me once a week. So having a consistent message and trying to promote consistent ways of communication, I think will take a lot of stress off parents. Because if there's 6 or 7 or 8 different ways of communication going on, it can be very confusing and overwhelming. And I'd like to support Nicole's point as well to consider ways to have parents engage with their students offline as well.
Yeah. Just a quick follow-up to that from the chat. Are you also considering like student data and privacy and security? Is technology and tech directors involved in this planning?
They are. There's some people at higher levels than me working through that. But I think a temptation and perhaps a danger is if teachers sign up for all this free software. That's if you look in your inbox right now, there's many companies offering free software to engage with your students. And if teachers sign up for a lot of different types of software without considering that data privacy issue, there could be some serious problems down the road. So I would encourage all people who are tuned into this webinar is to think about that privacy issue, because there's a lot of companies who are, and some of them, very well intentioned and good companies, but without data privacy agreements, that there could be some problems down the road.
Yeah, Patricia, anything to add from your district?
I wanted to add just to Nicole's point about making that connection. I've seen so many resources out there that are giving opportunities for us to make connections as family. I mean, we're stuck in the house in some states right now, and we're not allowed to leave. And so that offline time is so important. I saw something that came across about online cooking classes and just cooking with your kids, or using playing cards to explore math. Or I've heard people that have been taking out all the board games that they kind of let dust pile up on in the last few years. So I don't know, it's like part of this is just a crazy time, but then I'm the type of person that likes to find the silver lining on things. And I feel like for me, it is definitely a time that I can just take a break and just kind of enjoy my family. And sometimes that's really hard for us to do, especially when so many things are going on. But I think if we can just take care of ourselves, I've talked to a lot of my ed tech friends, and right now they are like the most in demand people. And the sad part is, in a role like mine, and I'm quite sure my panelists might feel the same way, sometimes we feel like we are secondary, where people are so focused just on curriculum and think that ed tech is separate, or like, well, we'll do that if we have time. And now people are seeing the value in having those connections virtually and having all these resources and tools available that you can do these amazing things with technology. So we're like in high demand. And so a lot of my ed tech friends are really having a hard time right now because they're just exhausted. And so just keeping that in mind and having that self-care, and sometimes you just need to turn it off and really focus on making sure that you're okay mentally, your social emotional needs as a person, and even looking at your kids. I mean, I think that's something that we really need to consider as well when we're talking about all of this that's going on. As a school, a lot of times we always talk about educating the whole child and making sure their social emotional needs are met, making sure the academic needs are met. So we still have to continue to do that. So if we can even provide resources to our families so that they can still receive those services, I think are key and crucial for making sure that we make it through all of this. We will make it through, but
well, yeah, definitely.
Definitely.
Nicole, I wanted to ask, so there's some great resources being shared in the chat right now. We also had a question about where we can send parents and teachers to really ramp up their digital skills. Any suggestions on that front?
Well, I don't know if anyone's had a chance to see the Facebook group that Patricia dropped in. I would definitely, if you can, join that group. Now, full disclosure, Patricia knows I'm not on Facebook myself. But the reason why I do recommend that as a place to connect is because I know Patricia, I know her work, I know the work of those that she's partnered with. These are educators who are first educators and then ed tech leaders, right? And they're parents, and they understand the importance right now of building community and sharing resources. Patricia, someone's asking you, can you share the FB link again? One other thing too, I see those great resources that are being shared, and I just want to remind, if you don't mind, Stephen, remind our attendees to switch their drop down to all panelists and attendees. Some of those are just coming to us as panelists, so everyone else is missing these great resources that you're sharing. And I would just say, you know, that is one great place to go to. One thing that Patricia puts emphasis on is trying one thing at a time. Not trying to try everything that's new, that's hot, that's exciting, but being very thoughtful about that one tool that you try. So if you decide you want to try Flipgrid, make it a family Flipgrid. Make it where it's families can check in together as they build community at home, and then they check in with you as the teacher. And then there are other resources that they'll share for those offline opportunities to connect with families too. So I would definitely, if you can, start there. And then I know not every district is tapping into the parent thing. I mentioned Corona Norco as one, and I'll drop their link in the chat too. But I would say as teachers, if you feel comfortable, definitely press your district in providing a page, a resource page for parents. Ask if they can do that. I mean, right now, what a perfect opportunity for them to build out a page that can support parents and even more. So I think that that's another thing that we can do, because I'm not suggesting that educators or teachers take on the extra work necessarily right now, but to definitely think about who can support in doing this work collectively.
Yeah, that's great. Really great question in the chat, or in the Q&A rather. It says, in the name of equity, some districts are not offering any remote instruction. The argument is that if online learning opportunities are not available to all students, they cannot make it available to some. Is that going too far? Should I have any thoughts?
Well, personally, I think providing online resources and ideas to engage is helpful for families. Where it gets tricky is, for example, if assessments, or I mean, if a school district says, "Oh, we're doing online classes right now, and we're going to roll out assessments and assignments," then it gets a lot more tricky with respect to access and with respect to inclusivity as well. I mean, are there policies in place to account for ELL students or students with disabilities, things like that? So I think that's a conversation that's going on in many parts of the country. Online learning that has grades attached to it versus resources to provide to families and parents to help them explore new things if that's what they choose to do. So that's the big debate going on in districts, I think.
Yeah. Nicole, Patricia?
Okay, Nicole.
Okay.
You were first.
Well, I would just add to that, you know, I mean, our districts have been very creative about thinking about how to make sure they still provide meals to go for students. And so, you know, my thought is, why not include, you know, opportunities for offline work to go, right? So let's not stop the learning. Let's not mandate that parents do things this, you know, specific way, but when you pick up your meal, you can maybe pick up a packet that supports, and it gives you options. Good pedagogy is about giving options. You can do this online if you have access, or here's the supplementary, the other resource, the other pathway, if you will, where you can do this offline. I think that would be pretty powerful to see a district do that.
I agree totally. And just to add a little bit more, I think sometimes We give options and choice boards. I've seen a lot of those going out where there are some offline and online type opportunities for the kids to participate. I also find it really interesting that a lot of resources are being like pulled out of their hat, out of a lot of districts' hats, where you're like, where did this money come from? So I've heard of districts that all of a sudden the state has all this money to give out devices to all the students in their districts. And so it saddens me that if that was opportunity has always been there, that why it hasn't been pulled out until now. I think we really have to pull together our resources. I think there's things available to help our families who don't have access. I do not think that everything should be digital that we're doing right now. As I mentioned earlier, I think we need to do some offline and have a balance for sure. I popped an article or information in there from Common Sense Media. They are definitely a trusted resource that has some really great ways that you can balance that as families. I just hope that from this experience, we are going to look at ways that we can actually continue this conversation about equity, but not only just continue the conversation, but act upon it. And I think that now the powers that be that are actually involved in this process and are like holding their hands up like, I don't know what to do, will now look at listening to some of the experts that are saying some decisions that need to be made as it relates to having access and opportunity for our students. So hopefully at the end of all of this, we're going to see some definite changes. But I just found it so funny that all of a sudden, all this money is coming out of the woodworks. I would also say, like for my district, tapping into your parent associations, tapping into the community-based organizations that are there. There are a lot of organizations that are providing resources, devices, all kind of things to families. We also have to think outside the box. Not everybody has to have a laptop, a MacBook Pro or a Chromebook. Sometimes they could just use a phone. So even if you're communicating with your families via video, if you put and make it in a platform that a parent can just pull up their phone and show their child the video, you're making it a lot easier for a family. So let's not put emphasis on the type of device that you have to have, but in just thinking outside of the box so that we can meet the needs of all of our families.
Yeah, that's great. Nicole?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that because I see a couple of questions. First of all, I think going back to something that Rushton said, I think that was spot on about how, if your district isn't allowing you to do anything, how that creates this new inequity, right? It's that other districts will continue the learning in some way or continue offering opportunities to learn and others won't. And so I know it can be challenging to push within the district, but when possible, really pushing the conversation at least, what are we doing to support our students or to offer access to learning in some way, I think is important. Another question came up about what about a school that's in an area where, the students and families are scattered. I think this is where building community is important because parents want to help right now. They want to help their own children and we want to help our communities. So if we can find parents in pockets who can create hubs, I think that would be nice. Have a parent pick up a collection of packets, learning packets, if you will, or resources that are printed. If you needed printed materials, have them at their home available for the families in that area, and then have another parent do the same thing. And that way the parents don't have to drive, far distances, if possible. I know right now we just went on lockdown, and so many people are not wanting to travel far, but I think learning should be considered an essential thing. So I think it's okay for us to make a short drive if we have to get what we need to help our children.
Yeah, that's great. So let's talk a little bit about learning goals. Obviously, they're going to look a little different than they would in ordinary circumstances. Is it equitable to, create one-size-fits-all learning goals for all students when not all students have equal opportunity, as Nicole was saying earlier? Or, how should we be thinking about modifying learning goals? Matt, do you have any thoughts?
Well, in our district, we're a standards-based district, and we assess on learning targets. And it might be that that it's not realistic to assess on all targets, but it might be more realistic, depending on how long this goes on, to have teachers focus on a few targets and do that well and have that consistent communication. I don't think anyone is proposing that, just business as usual. We're just going to transfer straight from the classroom and replicate that online. It's important to think differently how we're delivering education. I was just going to go back to what Nicole was saying briefly about delivering resources to families. We found on some of our family nights that we do for our underrepresented communities that the families that live farthest away from school are the families who are least likely to attend, partly because of transportation issues and other challenges. So I really like Nicole's idea of perhaps finding, someone in the community, in the apartment complex, in the mobile home park, perhaps, that could be, a base where you could drop materials if needed, so that people could walk and get those materials instead of having to find a way to the school. So there would be one person delivering materials to an area instead of parents trying to make it to a drop-off point at school.
Yeah. Patricia, do you have any thoughts about, learning objectives, what's kind of important and what should be kind of emphasized and prioritized these days beyond, connections, but kind of in a learning context?
I mean, that's really hard to say right now because primarily when their kids left you, they're on different levels, and kids had different needs and different priorities. So it makes it really tricky right now to like hone in on specific things. I know teachers know their kids, and so differentiation, is helpful. I know that'll be difficult. We're kind of really in a situation where it's hard because we don't have the answers on what is needed right now. I know for my district right now, what we're focusing on for the next week and a half, so because right now we're tentatively supposed to go back April the 6th, but that's kind of up in the air. But right now we're focusing on just reviewing material. Right now we're on spring break, so as of next week we're kind of rolling back in, and so they're going to do a lot of review of material and sending out information to parents that way. I don't think we're going to focus on anything new yet. I think if things start to prolong and we're out a little bit more, then our shift will change. So right now we're kind of in limbo, trying to figure out what the essential skills and learning goals are. The good thing about my district is we have a lot of resources available to our families already. And thankfully, a lot of our teachers have included that information out to parents before we even got word from the district what we were doing. And it was so funny. I had a first grade parent send me a message, just asking for some support and help and saying that their child just wants to go. I said, well, let them go. I said, let them lead the way. They know what they're doing as far as how to get into different resources. They know in first grade how to get into Clever, which is a single sign-on app that lets them get into all of these different programs. So just kind of let them lead the way. I saw something in our Facebook group where it wasn't a traditional schedule for families or for kids. It was more of the kids can make their own goals for that day or for that hour. So in math, what are your goals? And reading, what are your goals? And so the kid kind of drives what they're doing right now, while the districts are kind of trying to figure things out. So I think as parents, we can just use our instincts. Teachers, same thing. What you feel is needed and necessary. If you know your student has a lot of anxiety, then maybe your focus just is on making sure their social emotional needs are met. If you have a kid that is okay socially, but that they love math and they love to have challenges, maybe you're sending stuff to them specifically. That one size fits all, approach never works, even in the classroom. So we just have to keep that in mind and try to make it as normal as possible for our families and our kids. But we know that this isn't a normal situation. So we just kind of have to be flexible. I think that's key too, being flexible. It's not going to be the same way that it was in your classroom. You're not going to have the control that you had with teaching and learning in your classroom, but you might have to step back and kind of get out of your comfort zone just a tad bit, even if it's for a short period of time.
Yeah, I like that kind of giving yourself permission to let go some of that pressure and anxiety that you might ordinarily put on yourself to teach the perfect lesson or make sure that every student is on target, things like that. That's great. So I wanted to, so a very related question. Nicole, you said your research focuses on parents and family engagement. How receptive are parents to teachers reaching out and saying like, you know, I know your student is good at math, like Patricia was saying, or, you know, here's what I think, you know, you can help, you know, with, and are there any good strategies for leveraging that relationship?
Yes, there's definitely some positives around parents reaching out. I'll be transparent and say that my work is really centered on how we define parental involvement and parent engagement, and how it's traditionally been parents showing up to school for back to school night, parents going to events at school. And what I've been discovering is that engagement and involvement, if we allow the students and the parents to define it, it's about conversations between the parents and their children, which is quite interesting. It's less about this, you know, what we see as we need to keep pushing information to our parents. It's more about parents wanting guidance on how they can build stronger relationships with their children. I mean, it just reminds me, you know, I know, I can't tell you how many times my college daughter, when she was younger, I'd ask, how was your day at school? Good. What did you learn? Nothing. Come on. You learned something. So, you know, it's really about how do we encourage engagement, and I think again creates a great opportunity for us to do so.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So somebody in the chat asked, you know, what if some parents just do decide to opt their kids out of something like this, you know, continuing online learning, you know, maybe they feel too much is asked. As we were talking about before, there's a lot of extenuating circumstances. Is that an okay response, or how can schools really think thoughtfully about that? Nicole, we can start with you.
Yeah, my head's nodding because I mean, just because I think this is an important topic for us to think about. And it goes back to, I think, what a couple of people have mentioned already, how we potentially create an additional, you know, layer of inequity. And somehow, some way, we have to continue the learning to happen. Now, we can be creative about how we do it, but my concern definitely, and Patricia, I think we kind of lightly touched on this previously, what happens when we all get back to school, when they've said we don't need the testing, we don't need learning to happen. You know, it's almost as if here in the US we are now a year behind, you know, with our students and their learning. And someone also brought up, you know, what about our students who are identified as students who have special needs? How do we make sure that we're meeting their IEP goals? And I do see this as a challenge, and I really wish I had the right answer for this one, Stephen. I just think we will continue to have a lot of work to do, especially when schools start back up. We'll have to be fair about how we assess where we're at in the learning. And just as quickly as we may have been to say, you know, put the testing on hold right now, I think there needs to be thought given to how many years we put the testing on hold so we can recalibrate. I think of my own university, for example. I'm very happy that we just decided this year, right before things hit, we made the decision that the SAT score submissions would be optional for the admissions process, that students can make the decision whether or not they submit those scores, so that we're now considering the entire student and not just looking at them based upon their scores. So I think that's very important to think about.
Yeah. Matt, any thoughts about this?
Well, I don't have too much to add to what Nicole is saying. That it is a definite challenge, and of course, part of the whole equity issue is in looking at families. Some families, I mean, our families and families in this webinar are under stress, and some families are going to be under severe stress. And so, it's easy to say, well, I mean, it might be easy for me in my position to say, well, that's short-sighted for a family not to engage in all these resources. And it's tempting for me to say, but we know that a lot of our families are under intense pressures, economic pressures, and they might be, in a few weeks, they might be moving to find a different place to live. So, to add on to what Nicole and Patricia were saying, when school does come back, after all the efforts we've done with online learning and opportunities, we'll really have to think intentionally about, how we start up school again, and how we see where kids are, and how we differentiate to meet their needs.
Yeah.
Add one thing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Stephen. Add one thing. What Nicole and Matt are talking about is empathy. Just having empathy for our families. A lot of times I've dealt with situations this entire time that have been tough, and then this adds an extra layer to stress and anxiety. So you may have a parent that is saying, no, I don't want to do this, but maybe you need to tap into why. Maybe it's because they have so much going on. It could be that they lost their job due to all of this things that's going on, or that they're working so much that they can't put in the time that they normally could with their students. So we just have to have empathy, start asking questions, not necessarily prying, but being supportive and making sure that we let our family know we are there for them. About ourselves as teachers, we are, under a lot of stress, under a lot of scrutiny right now too. I hear both sides of it. At times, people are saying, oh my gosh, I cannot do what a teacher is doing. They deserve $1 billion trillion an hour to take care of the kids. And then we have other sides where they're saying, well, I could do this, and I'm doing better than the teacher. So we kind of always have that debate, but we still have to come to the terms that we need empathy for each side, and making sure that we're understanding what the needs are and not strictly thinking about the test. I mean, we've totally lost that focus, because I felt like that was what everybody was talking about for so many years, is the test. And right now we're not even talking about a test. We're talking about making sure that our families are supported and having what they need. Our kids are feeling supported. Our teachers are feeling supported. Even our administrators, they're working double time to make sure, and they're making decisions about things that we've never experienced as a society. So we have to have empathy all around. And I think if we start there, we'll continue to have conversations that we can help move everything forward. And when we get back to school, we'll be able to adjust a lot better, because we've continued those conversations and we've been supportive of one another.
Yeah. Matt, do you have any thoughts about empathy and kind of strategies for practicing that, and the social emotional supports that go along with that?
Well, I think that's something that districts are working through, and I know our district is working through. For many students, schools, the teachers are their safe place, and are their, what gives them comfort, and figuring out ways to establish those connections between teachers and students. And technology obviously can be a very powerful tool, whether it's computer, but it might be a phone as well. So maintaining those connections. And back to the systemic part, as we go on, if we go on for several weeks or months, figuring out a way as a school system to figure out how that might look. Some recommendations for teachers on how to connect with their families, so that there's consistency and communication to families as to what to expect.
Yeah, that can be kind of challenging guidance because schools don't really know what to expect.
Exactly, exactly. Um, you know, if you're a parent, for example, at a high school, it might seem kind of strange if one teacher is communicating 5 or 6 times a week, and another teacher is, you know, communicating once a week or once every 2 weeks. So establishing some type of expectations and realizing the teachers are all in different places as well, under different stress levels, um, and in, you know, figuring out this new reality for themselves. Many of our teachers are really fluent in technology and communication, and some aren't, and acknowledging that, and helping those teachers as well.
Well, it's the same with students, right? I mean, some students are, much more, and that goes to an equity issue as well. I mean, some students have just been around more technology or have had more access to opportunity when it comes to that. So, I mean, there's just a whole spectrum.
Definitely. I do know that many districts have ways to communicate to their families in multiple languages, their language of record in the student information system. And be interesting as time goes on to see how districts use those tools to communicate messages. Because for some families who don't have internet access, that phone call from a district is some of the primary information that they're going to get. So it'll be interesting to see how districts decide to use that tool.
Yeah, no, that's great. That brings up a really interesting point, Nicole. Have you done any work about family engagement in languages other than English, or have you seen any approaches to that?
I have not, and actually, Matt's work, we're members in the same organization, and his work actually has sparked some interest for me in engaging more in that area. I know we've here in California, a lot of our districts do send out messaging in the multiple languages. That's the nature of our state. That's how we communicate here. I don't know that that's common across all states, but something definitely I'd look to explore more.
Yeah, yeah. And anything else to add about the English learning families, Matt, that Beaverton is doing?
Well, we're communications on our remote learning resource page and our letters to parents. We're translated in multiple languages, definitely, and we're trying to stay attuned to that because we have, you know, a pretty good number of ELL learners in our district, and so being cognizant of that. So, yeah, as we move forward, making sure that directions and expectations and communications meet the needs of all of those different languages spoken. And of course, it's easier said than done, especially as things are evolving and changing so quickly. It's difficult to get things translated correctly. Some of our translation tools, digital tools, sometimes can make some mistakes that can be confusing to parents. And so having another set of eyes on that translation is really important.
Yeah, I did want to ask about tools in particular, not necessarily technology tools. It could be something as simple as, phone trees or something. But, what are some of your favorite tools that you're relying on, not just for communication, but, that you'll be moving into an instruction, Matt? Any specific tools that you're going to be leaning on?
Could you ask that question again?
Sorry. Yeah, just about any tools in particular that you're using, software, strategies that you're going to be using for instruction and keeping in touch with communication. I just want to give the audience some options of tools they might explore.
Well, it really depends on the type of district that the audience is teaching in, and whether they've adopted any district-wide tools, and if parents and students have already had experience with those. For example, we use Canvas as our learning management system, and Seesaw has been used extensively at elementary school level. And so trying to go with tools that students and parents are already familiar with is helpful. And so I would encourage listeners to kind of take an inventory of tools that students and parents already have some experience with, so that maybe the jump isn't as big. Of course, with that said, maybe you're in a district where there's no district adopted tools, and then the district has to come up with a plan to maybe choose a few tools that that maybe the majority of teachers could use. I really think that there's wisdom in not flooding parents with 30 tools from different teachers, because it just adds to the stress level.
Yeah, Patricia, any thoughts about specific tools that Ladue will be using over the coming weeks?
I'm glad to be back. My Zoom just completely crashed, but yes, we're a Google district, so we definitely rely on our Google tools to continue the learning. What I recommended to my staff is to utilize the things that you've already been using. Try not to introduce anything new right this moment. Just kind of get in the swing of this whole distance learning aspect, because a lot of this is very new for especially my elementary teachers. And so we definitely rely on our Google resources. I tell them to choose one tool, one resource. I gave them a list of things that we had available in our district. I said, but just choose one that you're going to utilize to communicate with parents. And my goal is for at least the grade levels to all get on the same page, and try to utilize the same resource. And I always talk about the collaboration piece with teachers. If we could all just collaborate and share the work and share the load, it makes it so much easier. So if we're creating Google Docs, we can share those out. A lot of our teachers are using Google Classroom already, so they're just continuing that process with their kids. We use a lot of outs to just have conversations. I keep my chat open so the teachers can ask me questions. So I just say find that tool. And if I were to name a couple that I think were really good, of course I said Google. Seesaw, Matt mentioned, is great for our littles. Google Classroom, Flipgrid, and all of those are ways just to connect. So just find that tool and that resource that works for your district. If you don't have any mandated tools or resources, I think this could be a good time for you to kind of branch out and look at what might work for your district. But other than that, I think just kind of go with what works for you at this moment, what you feel comfortable with, but at the same time, pulling out of your comfort zone just a tad bit to meet the needs of your kids.
Yeah, I like that advice. Stick with what you know, but feel free to go a little outside of your comfort zone, because isn't that what we ask kids to do as well?
Yes, we do. We definitely do. And sometimes as teachers, we get kind of stuck in a box and feel like we only can do these things, and kind of have a little bit of fear as it relates to jumping out that box in that comfort zone. But sometimes you just have to do it. And a lot of times people, if you step out of your fear and actually do something different, you don't know who you're going to inspire because you're doing that. A lot of times we don't realize people are watching us and looking at us and wanting to see what we're doing because it inspires them to do more. So just kind of take those initiatives. I think right now, nobody knows what they're doing. So it's not like you're going to be in a place where you're going to just really mess up. I think right now we're in a place where you can have a little bit of freedom to explore a little bit.
Yeah, that's great. I'm seeing some comments in the chat that people just enjoy videos, seeing their teachers on a video just to see their face and continue that connection. Nicol, Patricia, is that something that teachers, that's a pretty easy lift?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and Patricia just dropped exactly where I would go with it. Flipgrid is great if you can get the students on Flipgrid. My son's teacher uses Remind. He's in 4th grade. And she was learning Flipgrid and was very honest with us that this is new for her. But she said in the interim, hey, I used my cell phone in my backyard, and please let your students see, let your kiddos see this video. And she just sent a message to them, like checking in. And I thought that was amazing. So if you can just do short videos, email, upload it to your Google Drive and share the link there. Keep it simple, as Patricia mentioned, and just find a way to get the message out. I think the students need to feel that I mean, we aren't in the same space, but feel that human connection.
I
Yeah,
definitely agree.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I definitely agree. I just wanted to add to that sometimes we think we have to have fancy equipment to do that. As Nicole mentioned, just pull out your phone. I think most people have phones these days, and you just pull something out of your phone. If you have an iPhone or Android, whatever you have, there's some type of recording device that you have available in the palm of your hand that you can share out. She mentioned Google Drive, Dropbox, Flipgrid. All of those are resources that you can just send out. And it doesn't have to be a formal video, it doesn't have to be a professional green screen video. It could just be you sitting on your bed, talking to your kids, letting them know you're okay, and letting them know that they're okay too.
I was talking to someone this morning who has friends in international schools. And in some international schools, when the virus broke out, kids were sent back to their country of origin with their families. And so many different time zones. And I say that because that's the power of video. If you post something, it doesn't have to be real time. People can connect to it when they can and be assured that, you know, their teachers are still, you know, doing fine and concerned about them, and you want to connect with them.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So Nicole hit on something really interesting. We're about to wrap up in a few minutes, but you know, she said that, you know, students really need that human connection. Is anxiety, you know, student anxiety, family anxiety, is that something that we're seeing? Because certainly human connection can help with that. Is that something that you've been seeing with the families in your district, Matt?
Well, it's so new, you know, the quarantine and self-quarantine, but certainly anxiety and isolation and depression. I think those are definitely real issues, and I think that myself, you know, I get anxious not being able to connect with colleagues, although digital connections is certainly helpful. So. I think that the longer this goes on, the more important it is, be increasingly important to connect with our students, because I think that anxiety is just going to increase. And the more we can do, actually, I think it's a moral imperative that we work to make those connections with our students, help decrease isolation and anxiety in really any way that we can.
Yeah. Nicole, any last thoughts, things, you know, that districts might not be considering, but that they should be thinking about in terms of equity as they go forward from today's chat?
I would say, because we haven't seen it yet, I would definitely want districts and encourage districts to continue thinking about what we do next when our students come back. We're putting a lot of emphasis on, you know, pushing the learning out to them, which I think it's important that they continue to learn and grow, but I also think we need to be prepared, you know, for what's next. We suddenly were surprised when this happened and we didn't know what to do with the learning, and you know, we'll figure that out as a community, but let's get out ahead and think about what's next to support our students and families when we come back to school.
Yeah, that's great. A big thank you so much to all of our webinar panelists once again for lending their time and their insights. We had Patricia J. Brown, Matt Hiefield, and Nicole R. Howard. You can find their contact information on the screen right here, our Twitters. Again, I'm Stephen Noonoo. I'm the K-12 editor at EdSurge, and we provide the latest resources and news about how technology is shaping the way we learn and teach. And you can sign up for our free newsletters or find more resources at edsurge.com. And to check out more of our webinars, please feel free to visit edsurge.com/e/webinars. Thank you so much to everybody. Again, this conversation will be sent to you via email, and look for the recap on EdSurge next week. Again, I'm Stephen Noonoo. Thanks so much for attending, and take care. Stay safe, everyone.